So I asked you guys on Instagram what you wanted to learn this week, and everybody was really stoked about estrogen modulators. So we're going to talk about estrogen, where it is in the environment and what role it plays. But to really understand your hormones, you need to understand that it works in the complexity of the environment, right? So you are not just estrogen, you are not just testosterone. You're constantly interacting with the world, with the environment around you. That is the pesticides, the herbicides, the heavy metals. We also have commensal pathogens. We have good ones, we have bad ones, we have bacteria, we have viruses, we have parasites. So there's always a complexity, and I like to come back to this because sometimes we like to isolate things and we just focus on the picture of what estrogen is doing in the body, or we just focus on the picture of, for instance, in PCOS, we're looking at androgens. So what is testosterone doing? How much testosterone do we have in the body? Is estrogen converting to testosterone? We look at insulin, and this reductionist approach is very Western medicine. When you look at conventional medicine, it's about breaking things down and putting them into little pieces that we can then analyze under a microscope. While that is fantastic, we don't always look at the whole picture of what's going on. And it's really not just you and your estrogen. It's everything that's contributing to you and your estrogen. So that's where I'm really going to take today's video, and we're going to talk about what you can do to make sure that your hormones are balanced from the outside in and the inside out, because we are complex human beings and we need to take all those factors into account. So the first thing that I want to talk about in estrogen modulation is environmental toxicity. This is starting to come to the surface. People are starting to talk more about environmental toxicity. It's something that, we kind of just push to the side because it's not easy to fix. We are in our environment. But that said, there is a lot that we can do to eliminate these things from our environment and to essentially clean it up. And instead of healing ourselves within that environment, why not take all of that environment, clean it up, and then we're going to thrive within that. And actually, Dr. Jess MD, who I absolutely love on Instagram, talks about germ theory versus terrain theory, where germ theory is keeping essentially a fish, a person, an organism in a dirty environment and trying to heal them within that environment, where terrain theory is cleaning up that environment, cleaning up essentially that fish bowl so that the fish can then live and then thrive. And I firmly believe that healing is in terrain theory. We can't do it in germ theory. It doesn't make sense. It's just going to come back. That's why things never go away. It's just a broken model. So let's talk about estrogen modulators before I get off track again. So environmental toxicity, there's so many things that we're interacting with. We're looking at heavy metals. I've been digging a lot into EMF. EMF is our radiation. It's our Wi-Fi. It's our computers. It's all of these energies. Now, why does this matter? Okay, so think of this on a hormonal level. Your hormones are coming down an axis, correct? And they're interacting with the gut. They're interacting with organs. So we are electrical beings. Our cells, essentially, the frequency are electrical. When you go in, it's sodium, it's potassium, it's electrolytes. Well, what is that? That's the foundation of electricity. So we are electrical beings, and we're interacting with electrical radiation. What is that going to do? That's going to push things off balance. I read this really interesting article and actually wrote a post on it today about the link between EMF, heavy metal toxicity in our environment, and infertility, fertility issues, hormone imbalances. So what is the problem with EMF? The problem with EMF is that we're getting it from so many angles. We have Wi-Fi, we have our cell phones, we go outside, we've got these big 5G towers that are coming into play. And literally, it is impossible to escape EMF. Now, we know that we are electrical beings. We know that we are emotional beings. Guys, look at the nervous system. I have this huge fascination about the nervous system because the nervous system is electricity. That's how we receive inputs. That's how we receive sensations. That's how our mind, our brain interprets the external environment. Something happens, it becomes an input, and then our body responds to it through electrical waves. So that is no different from us on the cellular level. That is no different from our counterparts on the cellular level. It would be naive for us to think that parasites, bacteria, and viruses have no electrical conductivity within them. They are electrical beings just like we are. So to simplify this, when you stress an emotional system with things that are not necessarily good, and like I said, when I was looking at this research, the interaction between heavy metals and radiation or EMF is negative. It causes a negative input. It causes deterioration of the body. So what is that going to do pathologically, physiologically? Well, it's actually going to switch the the biochemical physiology of the body. So when I say biochemical, I'm talking about the hormone balance. I'm talking about blood sugar. I'm talking about, the stability, the physiology of your body that makes it homeostatic, which is, sorry, I'm using all these big words, which makes it normal. Essentially, you run at a basic certain chemistry. So when we throw that chemistry off, we experience dysfunction. And EMF is a large contributor to why our hormones go a little wonky. So number one, what can you do about that? You can unplug your Wi-Fi at night. You can help with EMF transmitters. I don't know personally which ones are fantastic because what do I use? It's on the market. I'm not going to tell you which one to buy. I personally like shungite. Shungite is really, really great for transmission. You can put it on the back of your phone. You can carry it around, but you can put it in your room. That just helps disperse the EMF energy. So enough of that. Let's talk about, again, environmental toxicity. So I've talked about BPA before. BPA is a really sneaky one, guys, because they took it off the market and they said, okay, everything's BPA free. But what they've done is they've chemically altered the chemistry of BPA. So it's BPA, but it's just in a different chemical form. So then they can take it to the market and they can market it to you. So if you want to understand these different BPAs, I actually have my free hormone exogenous estrogen guide that you can download. So head over to my Instagram. It's a free download. I break down all those different BPAs that are chemically different, but doing the same thing in the body so that you can kind of look at labels and understand that. So we want to avoid BPA. We want to avoid plastics. We want to avoid chemicals. So if you're in the grocery store and you're picking something up and you are not quite sure what that ingredient is, chances are that it's not natural. I know what apple is. I know what pineapple is. There are some names that are maybe Latin, that are maybe chemically written that we don't understand, and that can be a natural form. So that's where it's important for us to use maybe apps like Think Dirty to find which ingredients necessarily are good and which ones are bad. If you pick it up and you don't know what is in that, like if it doesn't say exactly what is in that product, you need to question it. You need to understand it and you need to really think about it. Canned foods, they are sitting around forever. They're leaching all of this stuff into our food and then we're eating it. That cannot be good for you. Think about the processing of food. Where is it coming from? How long is it sitting? Do they have to spray pesticides on this for it to stay as a shelf life? Like, what is the processing of this food and how are we getting it? And that's really important. Where are the soils? What are the soils doing? We become conscious and cognizant of this stuff, the more that we can remove these environmental toxicities. Another big one, cups. We go out to eat fast food. Fast food, we all know fast food's not great. We all know processed food is not great. But what's not great on top of that is that cups are lined with toxins and chemicals. So I'm putting a hot beverage into a reusable cup. Well, yeah, it's convenient. But if I go to Starbucks or if I go to Tim Hortons or if I go to any coffee shop and I do that daily, how many chemicals am I putting into my body? And I've talked about bioaccumulation before. This was a huge topic in the Fertility Vault when I was teaching women, is that we accumulate over time, and it might not necessarily hurt you right now, but when you start to develop things down the line, it's because you've accumulated toxins. It's so logical when you break it down like that. If I accumulate toxins, eventually something's going to happen in the body. Eventually the body is not going to be able to handle it. So that's another big one for estrogen. I've talked about deodorant, I've talked about makeup, I've talked about hair products, I've talked about anything that you use in your immediate environment. You really need to source and look at what is in it. Because if it is not natural, if it is not water, if it's not plant-based extracts, if it's not essential oil-based, if it's not something that is naturally occurring, you need to think about what it's doing to the body and most importantly, what it's going to be doing to your hormones. Again, side note on that guide about exogenous estrogens. Estrogen modulators or estrogen mimetics are chemical constituents that act like estrogen in the body. So they're not the synthetic form or they're not the naturally occurring form of estrogen. They are something else that binds like estrogen in the body. So what does that mean? That means that the body thinks that there's estrogen in the body when it's not in the body, when it's not your natural occurring level. So that's where we get estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance is the phenomenon or the clinical pathology of excess estrogen in the body. Now, it's not necessarily that you're producing more estrogen, it's that there's higher levels of estrogen. And when we have higher levels of estrogen, we have those clinical symptoms of estrogen dominance, which could be, fatigue issues, mood issues. There's a myriad of, sorry, I hate that word. There is a large spectrum of different symptoms that we can have with estrogen dominance. There's also estrogen in our foods. Now, this is where phytoestrogens sometimes get a bad name. For instance, soy. Soy products are estrogen phytoestrogens. They're phytoestrogens. So what that means is they buffer estrogens. Now, people think soy products, estrogens, I don't want to take soy products because I'm going to grow man boobs. I've heard that before. It's called gynecomastia. I'm being very serious. So men try to stay away from soy products because they don't want to induce that. And I've heard that before actually with my endometriosis clients, is that they are trying to reduce estrogen levels because high estrogen is linked to endometriosis. There's more to that clinical picture. That is very true. But soy itself does not act in the body the same as an estrogen medic. It's a phytoestrogen, like Vitex, like herbal products that are phytoestrogens. They buffer estrogen. They bring it down or they bring it up, and that's what the buffering is. So there's certain foods that can actually help us normalize levels rather than reduce them. Another great one, and I love this, it's not a phytoestrogen, but it's called flaxseed. We all know flaxseed because what happens when we have excess estrogen in the body? We want to get rid of it. We want to get it out so that the levels are not building. Well, flaxseed is a fiber. So what happens when we have this excess level of estrogen is that we either keep it in our liver and it continues circulating through our gut and comes back in. So what we want to do is we want to push it out, and that's what fiber does. Fiber binds those excess hormones and it pushes them out of the body so that we can gain normality. And this is a huge one for birth control. If you have been on birth control for a long period of time, chances are that estrogen, progesterone is a little bit off. There's not one woman that has come off birth control that their normals have been perfect. Their levels, have been perfect. That there has been no changes. That's because you're synthetically working with a hormone, and that it's not going to leave overnight. It's not going to go overnight. It's going to be stored in the liver. It's going to be stored in the adipose tissue. Adipose tissue also creates estrogens, and then it becomes this big complex issue of hormone imbalance post-birth control. That's a whole other topic that I don't really want to touch on today. I just want to narrow on estrogen and estrogen modulation in the body. Last note is on exercise and why exercise is really, really important. So exercise is important for a couple of reasons. And number one is that I just told you that adipose tissue creates estrogen. So adipose tissue is fat tissue. So extra fat, extra estrogen. It's typically just how it goes. So as we start to break down fat tissue, we start to expose the body to higher levels of estrogen. Now, if you have PCOS, you have potentially insulin resistance, you have more metabolic issues with weight distribution, so you might have issues losing weight, gaining weight. Usually it's losing weight. So my concern with that is that the more adipose tissue you have, the more estrogen that you're going to have, and you're already dealing with a hormone imbalance due to excess hormones, modulators in the body. So exercise is really, really important for that population, but also for everybody else, because what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the amount of adipose tissues. It's going to take all of those synthetic, those extra estrogens that are not true and inherent to the body. It's going to help eliminate them. It's going to help get rid of them. It's going to increase blood flow. It's going to increase oxygenation. It's going to bring the health of the cells up, and it's going to help normalize that HPA axis, because the more that we flow, the more that we go. And the more that we flow, the more that we go, the more that we get rid of environmental toxins, pollutants, heavy metals, all of that stuff that can also build up in our lymph drainage. So exercise is really, really important, even if it's just a little bit of movement, because that's going to help normalize our hormone levels. So I'm going to end the video here because I know if I go on too long, you all get bored. So I hope that was interesting. Let me know what you think of this video, and I will ask you guys what you want to know next week.